Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Hudak. Excited to welcome Maddy Hudak back to AFR. Do a little film study. Kind of a weird week. Of course, Saints played on Monday Night Football, so kind of the quick turnaround. But Maddy's good enough to jump aboard with us here, kind of recap, put a button on that Saints-Panthers game from Monday Night Football. Maddy, we appreciate it. How are you?
I'm doing well. I can't beep the phone this time now that I'm on video, so we're foolproof.
Well done right out the chute. I was thinking maybe that could be a good dismount at the end, but you beat me to it. Kudos to you. Well done. Hey, let me start with the thing that I think is everybody's biggest concern right now, and it's the offensive line. They've been bad 2 weeks in a row. Did you notice any improvement week 1 to week 2 at any of the spots?
I wouldn't say so much the spots. What I was noticing more than anything is it's not so much one player or two to call out. It's, if you look at the O-line kind of as an art, they're just kind of failing as a concerted unit to me. There was times where the left side would collapse. There were times where someone blew by Cesar Ruiz. Ryan Ramczyk had a couple of bad reps. Trevor Penning actually didn't do that badly. It just doesn't feel like they're creating much of a pocket there for Derek Carr quite yet. And that definitely affects the rhythm of the offense as a whole. But if nothing else, the running game, I think, improved massively in a lot of facets, including the way that they used all the players.
Okay, let's go there then. So we know the pass protection issues are legit and documented, but they actually ran the ball. And they ran the ball really largely without Jamal Williams. So it's a very good defensive front that you faced, just like the one you faced last week in Tennessee. So what was different? Why did the running game work this week as opposed to last week?
To me, I think a big component of it is Taysom Hill and the way that they actually used him in this game, having him throw a pass, hand off the ball, getting a toss pitched to him by Derek Carr, and then just having Adam Prentice out there as a blocker and using him more creatively on the plays that they were really just using Jamal Williams for exclusively in the first game. They ran 7 inside zone plays the first week, and they were all by Jamal Williams, and they had 2.4 yards per rush. This week, there was 4 of them split up evenly between all 4 running backs. And the same thing with the way that they ran between the tackles. And I don't know if that's a byproduct of would those carries have gone all to Jamal Williams had he remained in the game for the entire time. But if nothing else, I think you saw more potential in Tony Jones Jr. than you ever really saw in his time on the Saints at all.
What's the difference there with Tony Jones Jr.? Based on what you saw in camp or in years past, and then on Monday night?
It just didn't really seem like he had the instincts to see a hole and really shoot through it. And it felt like he was following his blockers and just making a lot quicker decisions back there. And I think the reasoning behind bringing him back, knowing that he knows this offense relatively well at this point, I think makes a difference. But I do at the same time think it was the usage that they had Taysom Hill out there handing him off the ball once or twice. And the defense has to account for Taysom Hill as is now in multiple facets. So having that kind of wrinkle in the game plan, I think opened up the running game. It just felt like all of the creativity was used on the running backs and wasn't really there with the passing game. And I think that's why you saw it suffer a little bit, but you can't get a passing game going without the run game. So it was good to see that improve in their usage and really spread out between all of those running backs.
She's on Twitter at Maddy Hudak _94. Give her a follow. Just a quick follow up there on the backs. I know Dennis Allen said they're not planning on bringing in another. I would love your thoughts on this, because if it just as you map it out here, Kamara's not back for another week. We know that Jamal Williams is injured. So now you're basically down to Kendre Miller coming off an injury, Tony Jones Jr., and then I guess Taysom Hill. Like, is that enough at the running back spot, or should they go add somebody else?
I mean, honestly, yeah, as much as I just talked up Tony Jones Jr. and all of that, it's ultimately one game, and really the second half of it at that. The question, it will be interesting to see if he's able to sustain that at all. But if he isn't, then you're literally relying purely on who's your, third backup quarterback at this point in Taysom Hill. And teams are going to know that. And I don't think you really want to rely on, like you said, a rookie running back who's coming off of a hamstring injury, which always tends to make me a little antsy about getting them back out there, because it just takes one tweak and then you're sometimes back to worse than square one. So as much as they kind of went after a linebacker earlier in the offseason, I think that everyone thought a running back was just as important. And you just see its importance because, like you said, you don't have Alvin Kamara for 2 more games. You probably don't have Jamal Williams. And I think defenses eventually can contain Taysom Hill if they know it's the only thing going on back there, assuming Tony Jones Jr., has the ability to follow up or not.
Maddy, what I'm going to stay on the offensive side. We'll go to the defense here in a second. What are you noticing? Obviously, a big part of the inefficiencies in the pass game is the pass rush, is the pressure on Derek Carr. But what are you noticing from Derek Carr with respect to timing and with his receivers two games into the season?
I think there's plays where you can see all the time he put in this offseason with guys like Michael Thomas. On the first completion of the game, on first look, it looks like he kind of threw the ball behind Michael Thomas. But if you go back and look how the safety was reacting, I think if he had thrown it to the inside rather than to the out, there could have been an interception there. And rather than just making a bad throw, it seems like he trusts Michael Thomas to make those real-time corrections. And you saw that work with Drew Brees. And I think that's why they really enjoyed their relationship together, because it was almost this silent communication in real time as plays were happening. And then that 42-yard reception by Chris Olave, I went back and counted. He's 30 yards away from where he catches the ball when Derek Carr releases that. And it's a pretty, for a 42-yard throw, had a relatively good amount of touch on it. And so if you're able to make those throws, we saw what he was able to do with Rashid Shaheed last week and a little bit in this game. The potential on the plays that work is there more than I think it really has been the last 2 seasons, where I think Andy Dalton was an efficient operator at times. But if it came down to him having to win the game at the end, there was really not that much confidence in that. And I think ultimately you've now seen that Derek Carr can pull it together and get it done at the end and score points.
That's so interesting. So just the point about the deep ball to Olave. So Carr released it when Olave was 30 yards from where he caught it. So that's just a ton of trust in your receiver getting to the spot and timing there. It's a really good illustration. I didn't ask you to look at this, so I'm not sure if you did. If you didn't, that's fine. Did you happen to look closely at red zone personnel groups, play calling, kind of what continues to plague this team a little bit in their ability to convert touchdowns in the red zone as opposed to field goals?
I'd have to probably go back and look, but it just seems like, again, you have like a 3rd and short, and then they take out Taysom Hill, and it just seems kind of nonsensical in the way that they use him a lot of times. And then when it seems to be super obvious, and they go back to that, but it just seems like they're trying to be almost too complicated in the end zone. You're not really seeing them get the tight ends involved. And that's something we saw a lot more in training camp, especially when they were practicing red zone offense. And you assumed between the guys that they put out there. And I think it matters too that Taysom Hill essentially has not been a tight end at all. And so that room is really one guy thinner, and they haven't seemed to really utilize them, I think, as they should, when it doesn't seem to need to be that complicated. Like Jimmy Graham, to me, should have gotten one of those easy touchdowns in the red zone by now, but that's where I mean, where the play calling is just a little to me, and they don't have the talent on the O-line to be able to make up for it, but they definitely have the talent in the receiver group. And that's something also to be said about the Saints for however many last few seasons, where Marquez Callaway and Deontay Hardy were wide receiver 1 and 2 for the quarterback competition.
Yeah, it's just crazy. You have these two tight ends that are 6'7". Like, what are you doing? You don't have to your point, you don't have to complicate this. Like, throw it up to him. Let him go make a jump ball. All right, couple more for you. Maddy Hudak is with us on Twitter at Maddy Hudak _94. Taking a look at some film review from Saints Panthers on Monday Night Football. Hey, flip it over. The defensive front 7 has been so good, and Maddy, it was a big question because you replaced so much personnel really on the inside, and then obviously with Davenport as well, and now you're without Peyton Turner. What is working so well, and who is working so well in that defensive front 7?
Honestly, they really all are. I think you're seeing it the most in how much Cam Jordan is able to do, because defenses aren't just clamping him down and basically just letting the other guys go one-on-one, knowing that they're probably not going to get that far. And I honestly think that the personnel they brought in on the interior is really an upgrade from what they had. I think David Onyemata was better a season before his last one, but he had a little more rotation going on there, whereas Shai Tuttle, I don't think was ever intended to kind of be a starting defensive tackle for the Saints, and he just kind of fell in there by happenstance. But they had a lot of injuries there last year, and I just think that Carl Granderson has been the biggest standout to me. Yeah. He has 5 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and 6 quarterback hits and a forced fumble in 2 games. I mean, that's a wild level of production, but you see Nathan Shepard on the interior, Kalen Saunders, Brian Breezy has to me, really ascended in just 2 games. And so not having to only rely on Cam Jordan, and the fact that you lost Peyton Turner and no one really cares, not to be rude, but it's less that you hear all this frustration about Peyton Turner's durability because of what they're able to produce up there. And I mean, they made Bryce Young look like just an absolute rookie for the most part. And he did not seem to have that many rushing yards for their issues with mobile quarterbacks in the past.
You know what, Maddy, what's interesting, I'm glad you brought up Brzee, because Granderson has been the stand. He's about to get broke off too. I mean, that guy's on a 2-year, $5.2 million deal. He's about to get broke off, and good for him. But Brzee we talked about Brzee and Foskey so much in camp because, I felt like I would ask you every day about those rookies. They made no impact. Now, Foskey dressed, and we didn't see. I mean, he almost blocked a punt, but defensively, I don't think we saw much from him. But Brzee in both games now has made his presence felt. That's a pretty. I don't know what other observation you have on Brzee, but that's a pretty dramatic swing from how ineffective he was in camp to what he's been able to do through 2 games of actual game time now.
I think there's 2 things. I just think, again, where how Cam Jordan is as a player. And so when they're going a little lighter, just by the nature of where their position is during training camp, I think you have a lot more to go off of. Whereas I think some guys just thrive on game time and get that kind of fire in them. And I definitely think you see that in Brzee, but he has speed and he has really good pass rush moves, and he's giant for his size to be able to move that fast. You can't coach those types of things up. So he has the natural traits there, but I just think within 2 games, the fact that he's gotten immediately up to play speed and is making really an impact when all you ask for, essentially from your defensive tackles, is to really shore up those blockers to allow your ends to get free. Well, he should have a forced fumble, if not for the holding call by Paulson Adebo. But I mean, if I was an opposing quarterback, I would honestly not want to face this Saints front 4. And that's something that they really haven't been able to say for the last few seasons. And that comes all across interior and exterior.
Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield the next 2 weeks. I mean, this Saints defense should keep eating. She is Maddy Hudak. Follow her at Maddy Hudak _94. Of course, one of our great correspondents here. You can find herself at the Saints Wire. She's Tulane sideline reporter for the radio broadcast, host Before the Whistle podcast. I mean, when it's football, Maddy's everywhere during this time of year. I know you're busy. Always appreciate you taking a couple of minutes, and we'll look forward to doing it again next week.
Awesome. See you then, BP.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.